But I also like the fact that it's written out, it's easily definable as to where it goes and why they got what they did. So I certainly would encourage to sit down and see how much they're willing to take over on their behalf and see where those dollars add up to.
John?
So basically, you're talking fee for service. And instead of just writing them a check and saying, here, use this for whatever cost you need to cover, as far as we did the 25, and now we're on like 4,000.
That piece is for.
Yeah, so-
Just for 11.
Yeah, just for 11.
In 12, that 4,000 goes away as well.
So
and
you're
it would
saying
just be
fee for
fees.
service in regards to that portion of the budget. And I like the idea, I like that idea about them doing dog licensing. If it's something they're interested in doing, I think it would be.
If there's some minimum requirements that we have to have concerning animals in the city, perfect, we can define that. But the costs associated, the dollars that are spent, whether they're coming to them or coming to City Hall, I think those discussions need to be talked about and identified. And so.
Dave?
I've been looking over the agreement with West Columbia Gorge Humane Society, and I've got some concerns about whether or not we're complying with the agreement. What's a good time to come in? I don't think that this is the place to talk about that, but can we get together and talk about that?
Sure.
They're having a workshop where we could all hear it. I'd like to hear all the information that like you're requesting. Make it some piece of a following workshop.
I don't mind sharing it. My concern would be that I've misunderstood something and haven't interpreted the contract right, and I would waste your time. But if I find out that it's an issue, can I bring it back to a workshop?
Or you can just email to us. Someone email.
Yeah.
I know I went through it 3 months ago and gave some notes to RJ, but I don't remember there was anything that jumped out that I didn't think they
I'll tell you
were
what,
already
Dave,
popping through on.
In preparation for our get-together here, look, I've highlighted my concerns there.
I guess I'd like to hear the chief's concerns and what he sees, because he looks at it from a different standpoint with his two guys down there and how that's operated. So
It's actually out of a separate, animal control budget, and the Humane Society, two separate animals, kind of.
Yeah,
they
go-
intermingle every day.
Yeah, they
so
go back and
I-
forth.
But as far as how that impacts having them local,
Mhm. Okay.
I think that's a bigger thing for us, and there's, obviously, it keeps those guys closer to home. They're not running to 192nd, so.
I guess that's what I'm after, is your
Yeah.
piece of it, of what is the advantage to your department?
The
to keeping
advantage
this
to us
thing
is
alive?
that just probably less downtime for them to run an animal out to 192nd. That's really pretty much what we're talking about. And less if they're having to take over other chores such as feeding the dogs and cleaning the kennels and that type of thing, then you add some, significant time to their day, probably, a couple of hours every day to do those chores. So if it went back to the way it was when they were taking care of feeding the dogs, cleaning the kennels, that sort of thing, then.
So there is some value to his side of the world then, that if we did go back the other way, here we are having these two guys down there doing those things that are being taken care of by somebody else.
Yep.
I guess in theory, I think that piece of that, it'd be nice to take a look at that and say, well, if it's costing us $40 a day to have one of our guys down there feeding and cleaning.
Yeah, it wouldn't cost us any more. It would just come out of patrol time.
It just comes out of
patrol time.
their
Okay. So it wouldn't.
hours, so out of an 8-hour day.
They wouldn't be on the roads or answering calls
5
as
hours
much.
they're actually out doing something, or 5.5, and the other 2.5 hours they're.
That's why we looked at what is the if there was an alternative, we're not saying that it should be the alternative, but just as a benchmark in terms of cost, what would it cost to go to Southwest? That's a benchmark for us to look at in terms of how we price our relationship with West Columbia Gorge.
There'll be some that will argue, but it is not in my mind to try and put the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society out of business and have them close their doors. I think they provide a phenomenal service to the community that as they've well stated in meetings, goes well beyond, you know, the care and feeding of impounded dogs, and I believe that to be true. You know, for me, it's just trying to arrive at what is the most adequate and appropriate cost that the city should be involved in on that side. You know, looking at, and I said earlier this year and there's been a lot of, certainly a lot of concentrated focus put on the 25,000 going to 4. But I've said from the start, if there's something we could do on the other side in there, I'm okay with that. Again, if we don't make some sort of other arrangements, if we don't get creative in it, and they do end up having to unfortunately close their doors, our next alternative isn't $10 a day, it's, you know, something significantly more. So I don't have a problem when it comes down to a cost of the service, to get that more towards where it should be, which I think if I listen to the Humane Society or local Humane Society correctly, you know, they've said that additional money goes towards helping them staff that facility more and better so that they can provide those services. To me, that's not an additional 25,000 in the budget. That's we need to look at these fees and really get them to where appropriately they can be. It's still not gonna cover it completely in there. It's not gonna come anywhere close to covering it completely in there, but at least it gets it, in my mind, to what is our next alternative and what's the cost of that if this doesn't work. So.
I don't know if I mentioned it, but my general concern is that we may not be in compliance with the agreement that was drafted 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted
Sure.
to
Absolutely.
kick around.
So is this the
I'm on
agreement
your
with
side.
Camus or with is this the agreement with Camus or with the Humane Society?
This is Camus.
This is the Camus agreement.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking Humane Society.
Yeah, that's
You're
what I thought,
talking
too.
about the costs associated with cannabis.
Right.
Well, let's look at both of them.
Yeah, and we did, but we'll certainly take a look again, because there may be things that we either looked at differently or whatnot in there, so. And seems like there's an update to that too. There is. It was updated, I think the last update was in, I'm gonna get this wrong, but I think it was 2006.
Some more information to come.
There been some amendments. Yeah,
I have it here.
I think what we wanted to get tonight was just kind of obviously a read, not a vote from the council of, are we looking at this correctly? Is there heartache on anybody's part of if we're barking up the wrong tree? Barbara, you knew it was coming.
I like this, Sean, that the doors of communication are not closed. And if we get the 4,000 over to them this year, that's 2 months of their operation moving forward. In that time, you can sit down and we can revisit this thing, and you guys will do what David said in looking at those numbers of Southwest Washington versus here. Lots of things can happen between now and then.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it can happen, and what we may do for purposes of the budget is insert another number in there before Monday that you'll receive information on in your packets, just as a placeholder. It'll be more, but if we end up not going that direction, doesn't mean we have to spend it all. You know, at the same time, I would, you know, again, I'm a little bit of a stickler, and I'd rather get to an agreement and get it done if we can before the end of December, rather than be into 2011 operating for 2 months without an agreement that already.
Which agreement, is that our budget